I had always been the quiet one, the guy who kept his head down, worked hard, and avoided unnecessary drama. That was my way of dealing with the world. I didn't crave attention, I didn't chase after promotions with fake smiles and networking games. I let my work speak for itself. It had worked so far. I was a software engineer at one of the top tech companies in the city, pulling in a solid salary, with a promising career ahead. I had my routines, my stability, and for the last 3 years, I had Maddie. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, it really helps, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. Maddie was everything I wasn't. Social, charismatic, effortlessly charming. She worked in marketing, always in the center of things, laughing at office parties, making connections with people who could barely remember my name. I used to love that about her. She could walk into a room and make it warmer. It made me feel like, despite my tendency to keep to myself, I had someone who brought color into my otherwise predictable life. But lately, something had shifted. She had been distant, her phone always in her hand, tilted away from me when she typed. At night, she would turn away as soon as we got into bed, scrolling through messages with a half smile that had nothing to do with me. She used to tell me about her day, the little frustrations with her clients, the latest gossip from the office. But now, when I asked, she just said, "Nothing interesting," and changed the subject. Then there was Gavin Ross, our new director. He had joined the company about 6 months ago, and within weeks he had everyone wrapped around his finger. Gavin was the type of man people naturally followed. Tall, confident, with that easy, self-assured arrogance that made others hang on his every word. He knew how to command a room, how to make people feel like they needed his approval. I had never cared for guys like him. They got ahead not because they were smarter or better, but because they knew how to play the game. At first, I didn't think much of it when he started showing interest in Maddie. He talked to everyone, after all. But then I noticed the way his eyes lingered on her, the way he leaned in when they spoke. And Maddie, she laughed too easily at his jokes, touched his arm when she talked. She started staying late at the office, coming home hours after I did, claiming she had extra work. It wasn't like I didn't trust her, I just didn't like how it felt. The first real crack in my trust came on a Tuesday night. Maddie had come home late again, smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't hers. She kissed me on the cheek and mumbled something about a long meeting. When she went to shower, I saw her phone light up on the counter. A message. "Wish you didn't have to leave so soon. Next time, stay longer." No name, just a number. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't ask her about it. Instead, I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just a friend, maybe it was nothing. But that seed of doubt had already taken root. The next day at work, I tried to push it aside, but I couldn't. My focus was shot. That was when I noticed something else. Something even worse. I had been working on a major software update, something critical for the company. I had access to some of the most sensitive data, a privilege only a few engineers had. That morning when I logged in, I saw something strange. An unauthorized login attempt flagged under my credentials. My stomach tightened. Security breaches were taken seriously here. If someone was trying to use my access, it could mean serious trouble. I started digging, checking the logs, looking for anything that didn't add up, and that's when I found it. The login attempt had come from inside the company, from an executive's device. More specifically, Gavin's. I felt the blood drain from my face. Why would Gavin be accessing my account? And why was there now an internal investigation report in my inbox with my name on it? It got worse. Later that afternoon, I overheard 2 of my coworkers talking near the break room. My name came up. "I heard Carter's getting axed," one of them said. "Something about improper access to company data." No way, that guy barely talks to anyone, let alone leaks stuff. I don't know, man. Gavin was talking to HR earlier. If he's involved, it's serious. I forced myself to keep walking, my pulse hammering in my ears. This wasn't some mistake. Someone was setting me up. And I knew exactly who. When I got home that night, Maddie was already there, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I walked in. "How was work?" she asked absently. I stared at her. at the woman I had trusted, the woman I had built my life with. My mind was spinning, replaying everything. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she had slowly pulled away from me these past few months, the way she had gotten closer to Gavin. I thought about the message on her phone. "Wish you didn't have to leave so soon." I thought about the unauthorized access, the whispers in the office. And I realized something. I had already lost, I just hadn't figured it out until now. I didn't say anything to Maddie that night. I sat across from her at the dinner table, watching as she absent-mindedly scrolled through her phone with one hand while twirling her fork in her pasta with the other. She looked comfortable, relaxed, as if nothing in her world had changed. The same woman I had spent the last 3 years with, the same one who used to light up when she saw me, who would talk for hours about everything and nothing. But now, she was a stranger. I wasn't sure when the shift had happened, but I could feel it as clearly as I could see her sitting in front of me. I kept my voice casual, neutral. "Long day?" She nodded, not looking up. "Yeah. Just a lot of meetings. Gavin's been putting a ton of pressure on the team. You know how it is." I didn't respond right away. I just watched her, watched the way she mentioned his name so effortlessly, like it was just another part of her day, like he wasn't the same man who had been circling her for months, the same man who had framed me for something I hadn't done. She finally glanced up, raising an eyebrow at my silence. "What?" "Nothing," I said, shaking my head as I forced a small smile. "Just thinking." She didn't press, just gave a small hum and went back to eating, completely unaware that I already knew. That I had seen the message, that I had put the pieces together, that I was already working through the next steps in my head. I slept next to her that night, listening to her steady breathing, staring at the ceiling while my mind raced. The shock had faded. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was controlled now. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to break things. I wasn't going to confront her and demand answers that would only come in the form of more lies. No, I had a different plan. One that wouldn't just expose her, but would make sure that both she and Gavin paid for what they had done. The next morning, I went into the office like nothing was wrong. I passed my coworkers, some of whom avoided looking at me, others who gave me strange, uncertain glances. The whispers had started. I could feel it in the way conversations paused when I walked by, the way people quickly turned back to their screens. They already knew something was happening. Maybe they didn't have the details yet, but rumors spread fast in places like this. I stopped by the coffee station, filling a cup while keeping my eyes on the glass walls of Gavin's office. He was inside, leaning back in his chair, looking completely at ease as he spoke with another executive. The arrogance was dripping off him. He knew what was coming. He had planned this. My fingers tightened around my cup as I turned away. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I spent the first few hours of my day cleaning up my digital presence. I backed up all my important files, wiped any personal traces from my work laptop, and made copies of logs and emails that seemed out of place. I had seen setups like this before. Once HR called you in, it was only a matter of time before they shut down your access, revoked your credentials, and escorted you out like a criminal. I had a small window and I intended to use it wisely. At exactly 11:23 a.m., an email popped into my inbox. The subject line was simple: HR meeting URG. I clicked it open, already knowing what it would say before I even read the words. Please report to conference room 3B at 3 p.m. regarding an internal investigation. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, letting it sink in. This was it. The beginning of the end. I took a slow breath, then glanced up. Gavin was watching me from across the room. The moment our eyes met, he smirked, lifting his coffee cup in a mock toast before turning back to his work. I wanted to wipe that smug look off his face, but not yet. I stood, grabbing my phone, my laptop, and my bag. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for them to pull the rug out from under me. I had work to do. Instead of heading home, I drove downtown, parking a few blocks away from an old coffee shop I used to frequent when I needed to clear my head. It was small, tucked away between two brick buildings, the kind of place that didn't have security cameras or a bunch of people glued to their laptops. I ordered a black coffee, took a seat in the back corner, and opened my laptop. My hands moved automatically, years of muscle memory kicking in as I accessed the encrypted backups I had pulled from my work account. I sifted through them, scanning for anything that felt out of place, any anomaly that could tell me what Gavin was really up to. Because this wasn't just about getting me fired, that was too simple. No, he had something bigger planned, and I needed to know what it was. I started digging into the server logs, cross-referencing timestamps, checking access points. And then, buried deep within the metadata of one of the transferred files, I found it. A name. Ross and Whitman Consulting. A shell company. Gavin wasn't just trying to get rid of me. He was selling company data, and he was using my credentials to do it. My grip on the laptop tightened. This was bigger than I thought. And now I had proof. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, letting it all sink in. My pulse had steadied, my mind had cleared, and now all I felt was a cold, calculating focus. Gavin thought he had backed me into a corner. He had laid out his trap carefully, making sure every piece was perfectly aligned to fall on me. But he had overlooked one thing. I wasn't as blind as he assumed. He had spent months maneuvering, shifting the blame onto me, eroding my credibility without me even realizing. And Maddie? She had played her part well, whether intentionally or just as a convenient distraction. Either way, she had helped pave the way for this moment. I went deeper into the files, scanning every digital footprint Gavin had left behind. Most of the transactions were subtle. Data transfers disguised as standard operations, filtered through encrypted channels that would take an average IT investigator weeks to unravel. But Gavin wasn't dealing with someone average. I had built parts of this security system myself. I knew the back doors, the weak points, the places no one thought to check, and there it was. Ross and Whitman Consulting. A shell company, most likely offshore, receiving stolen company data in carefully timed batches. It wasn't just a one-time thing. He had been doing this for months. I checked the timestamps again, cross-referencing with Maddie's schedule. Some of these data transfers had occurred on the exact nights she had claimed to be working late. The weight of that realization settled in my chest. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It wasn't just an affair. She had been there, watching this unfold, knowing exactly what was happening, and she had said nothing. Maybe she had even encouraged it. Maybe she had whispered in his ear about how easily I could be replaced, how my name would be perfect for taking the fall. I wanted to believe she hadn't known, that maybe she had just been along for the ride, enjoying the benefits of being with someone like Gavin. But after seeing how she had pulled away from me these past months, how seamlessly she had slipped into this new version of herself, I knew the truth. I exhaled slowly, steadying the simmering anger threatening to rise. Now wasn't the time for emotions. Now was the time for action. I pulled up a separate program, one I had built years ago for personal projects but had never truly needed until now. It was an automated script designed to mirror flagged data in real time without alerting security logs. It worked silently in the background, leaving no trace that anything had been copied. Gavin thought he had complete control over the situation, but he had underestimated me. With a few keystrokes, I secured every single piece of evidence. His transactions, his communications, his entire blueprint for how he planned to walk away clean while I took the fall. I checked the time. 2:15 p.m. The HR meeting was in 45 minutes. By now, the case against me was already built. I could imagine the scene waiting for me. Stiff-faced executives sitting across the conference table, folders filled with false accusations, already convinced of my guilt. There would be no real discussion, no genuine attempt to understand my side. Gavin had ensured that. I was already guilty in their eyes, a liability to be quietly removed before anyone could ask too many questions. But Gavin had made a mistake. He thought I was just another quiet tech guy, someone who would crumble under pressure, someone who would take the loss and disappear. He thought I wouldn't fight back. I closed my laptop, drained the last of my coffee, and stood. The cold, calculating focus had fully settled in now. There was no more doubt, no hesitation. Gavin had played his game well, but he had no idea that I was about to rewrite the rules. I walked into the office with the kind of calm that only comes when you know exactly what's going to happen. The HR meeting was set for 3 o'clock, but I wasn't walking in there to plead my case. I wasn't walking in there as the man they thought they had beaten. Gavin had spent months setting this up, tightening the noose around my neck. But what he didn't know was that I had been cutting through the rope while he was busy celebrating his own victory. The entire floor felt different, like the air itself was shifting. People gave me side glances. Some avoided looking at me at all. I caught snippets of hushed conversations as I passed. My name, HR, security breach. The rumor mill was working exactly as Gavin had planned. He wanted me isolated, painted as a problem, someone no one would want to be associated with. He had done this before. Maybe not to this extent, maybe not with as much personal satisfaction, but he had played this game with others. The difference now was that I wasn't just another casualty in his path. I was something he hadn't accounted for. I stepped into the conference room at exactly 3 o'clock. The table was filled with the usual faces. 2 HR reps, one from legal, a security officer, and of course Gavin, who sat at the head of the table with a carefully crafted expression of concern. Maddie wasn't there. That told me everything I needed to know. She had played her part, and now she was out of the way, letting Gavin handle the cleanup. Ethan, one of the HR reps, started, her voice soft, rehearsed, the kind of tone meant to make what was coming seem professional instead of personal. We've been conducting an internal review of recent security incidents, and, unfortunately, your name has been linked to multiple unauthorized data transfers. Gavin folded his hands on the table, nodding slightly as if he was just hearing this for the first time. "This isn't easy for any of us," he added, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But given the nature of the breach, we have no choice but to take immediate action." I let the words sit in the air for a moment before I exhaled, shaking my head slightly. "Immediate action," I repeated. That's an interesting way to phrase it, considering the breach wasn't mine. A flicker of something crossed Gavin's face. Irritation, maybe. He didn't like when things didn't go according to his script. "Ethan, I understand this is a lot to take in, but the evidence..." I leaned forward, cutting him off. The evidence was planted. The room went silent. The HR reps exchanged glances. The security officer straightened slightly. Gavin's smile didn't falter, but I saw the stiffness in his posture now, the slight tension in his jaw. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "It is," I agreed, keeping my voice even, "and I have the proof to back it up." I pulled out a flash drive from my pocket and slid it across the table. One of the HR reps hesitated before picking it up, glancing at the others. "What is this?" I looked directly at Gavin when I answered. "The real security logs, the ones that show who actually accessed the files. The transactions leading back to Ross and Whitman Consulting, the metadata that connects the unauthorized transfers to Gavin's credentials." The room tensed. Gavin let out a small, forced chuckle. "Ian, I don't know what you think you've found, but I can assure you..." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice sharper now. "Don't act like you don't know exactly what's on that drive. We both know you thought you covered your tracks. And to be fair, you almost did. But you got lazy. You were so focused on making me the perfect fall guy that you forgot something important. I built parts of this security system myself. I know where to look. I know..." The legal rep cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "If these allegations are true, we will need to conduct a formal investigation." I shook my head. "No need. Because I didn't just bring this to you." Gavin's face paled slightly. I leaned back, folding my arms. By now, every major stakeholder in the company has received a copy of that drive. IT security has it, the board has it, hell, even the press might have it soon, so no. This isn't just some internal review anymore. Silence, thick, suffocating. Then Gavin stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You think you can just fabricate evidence to cover your own mistakes?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. If it was fabricated, then you have nothing to worry about. I tilted my head slightly. Unless, of course, you're nervous about what they'll find. Gavin's expression tightened, his jaw clenched just enough for me to notice. He was calculating, running through his options, but for the first time since this started, he didn't have control. He had walked into this room expecting to deliver the final blow, to watch me squirm under the weight of his fabricated evidence, to enjoy the moment he destroyed me. Instead, he was the one on the defensive, and I could see the realization creeping in. He had underestimated me. The HR reps were frozen, unsure of how to proceed. The legal rep hesitated, glancing between me and Gavin, his hand resting near his folder, as if debating whether to even open it. The security officer, who had been sitting in silence the entire time, finally leaned forward, his fingers interlocked on the table. "We need to review this immediately," he said, his tone carrying the authority that the others lacked. He turned to Gavin. "If what Ethan is saying is true, this is more than just an internal issue. It's corporate espionage, a felony." Gavin forced a laugh, but it sounded brittle. "You can't seriously be taking this nonsense at face value. He's just throwing out accusations because he got caught." I shrugged. "Then go ahead, open the files, disprove me." No one moved. The weight of the situation was finally sinking in. They had walked into this room believing they were about to witness a simple termination, an open and shut case. But now, there was something bigger at play, something they couldn't ignore. If they sided with Gavin without reviewing the evidence, they would be complicit. If they ignored the proof I had provided and it came out later, their jobs, hell, their entire reputations, would be on the line. Gavin knew it too. His fingers twitched at his side, a tell I had seen before in people who realized the game was slipping away from them. His mind was working overtime, trying to find a way out, trying to salvage something, but I had already closed every door. Then his mask cracked. "You little prow," he caught himself, inhaling sharply before shaking his head, forcing another fake laugh. "This is absurd. I don't have time for this." He turned to the HR team. "I assume we're done here. Let's not waste any more of the company's time." The HR rep, the one who had spoken first, looked at him and then at me. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was no longer sure which side she was on, and that hesitation was all I needed. The moment someone like Gavin lost absolute confidence from his audience, his power started to slip. I leaned back in my chair, completely at ease now. "Yeah, Gavin, maybe we are done here." I checked my watch. "In fact, I think the board meeting should be starting any minute now. You know, the one where they'll be reviewing all of this." His eyes flickered with something close to panic, just for a second. He recovered quickly, but I had seen it. He had assumed I would stop here, that I would be satisfied just proving my innocence. He hadn't realized that I had gone beyond that. This wasn't just about clearing my name, this was about destroying him. The security officer stood. "We'll be placing you on administrative leave effective immediately," he said, his voice firm. He wasn't addressing me, he was looking directly at Gavin. "Until a full investigation is conducted." Gavin's composure cracked completely. "You've got to be kidding me," he snapped. "You're actually listening to this?" The legal rep adjusted his tie, uncomfortable but resolute. "Given the severity of the allegations and the evidence provided, we don't have a choice. If there is even a possibility that confidential company data was misused, we have to investigate." I watched Gavin's confidence drain from him in real time. He had come into this meeting expecting to leave as the man who had orchestrated my downfall, but now he was the one being escorted out. He turned back to me, and for the first time since this started, there was no smugness, no arrogance, just pure, unfiltered hatred. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath. I smiled. "Oh, I know. That's the best part." He was forced to leave the room as security escorted him to clear out his office. I sat there for a moment, watching the stunned expressions around the table. No one knew what to say. They had walked in expecting to see an execution, and instead, they had witnessed the beginning of Gavin's collapse. I pushed my chair back, stretching slightly. Well, I'd say this was productive. Let me know if you need anything else from me for the investigation. I walked out of the room without looking back. I had won, but I wasn't finished yet. By the time I stepped out of the building, the sky had started to shift into the deep oranges and purples of early evening. The crisp air filled my lungs as I stood at the curb, letting it all settle in. It was over. Not just the meeting, not just Gavin's attempt to bury me, but everything. My time at this company, my relationship with Maddie, the life I had thought I was living. I had spent months being blind to what was happening around me, allowing myself to believe that things were normal even as they unraveled. But now, there was nothing left to be unsure about. The game had played out, and I had won. I pulled out my phone and checked the messages. The fallout had already begun. A company-wide email had gone out, announcing that Gavin Ross had been placed on indefinite leave pending an internal investigation into misconduct. It was the polite corporate way of saying that he was done. Even if by some miracle he avoided legal trouble, his career in this industry was finished. He had built his entire reputation on control, on his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. Now, his name would be attached to corruption, fraud, and data theft. He would be unhireable. I scrolled further, a message from an old friend in IT. Dude, this is insane. Board's already scrambling. You really pulled the plug on this guy? I smiled slightly, but didn't respond. There was nothing else to say. The next few days played out exactly as I had expected. The investigation moved quickly. Once they started pulling at the threads, it all unraveled. More evidence surfaced. Financial records, hidden transactions, old emails Gavin had been careless with. Turns out, I hadn't been his first attempt at a scapegoat, just the one who fought back. The board cut him loose within 72 hours, severing all ties before the media could catch wind of just how deep his corruption ran. He was officially erased from the company, his entire history wiped from the website, his projects reassigned. It was as if he had never existed. Then came Maddie. I had been waiting for it. The first text arrived late at night, a hesitant, "Hey, can we talk?" I ignored it. The next day, another one. "Ethan, I didn't know about all of this, I swear. I just want to explain." I almost laughed at that one. Of course she wanted to explain. She wanted to smooth things over, rewrite the past in a way that made her look less guilty, less complicit. Maybe part of her even believed it. But she had known. Maybe not about the extent of Gavin's crimes, but she had known enough to see where things were going. She had chosen to be with him. She had chosen to leave me behind before I even realized I was being left. A few days later, the texts turned into missed calls, then voicemails. I didn't listen to them, but I could imagine what she was saying. Excuses, regrets, maybe even a few weak apologies. But none of it mattered. I had nothing left to say to her. She wasn't part of my life anymore. She had made sure of that the moment she sided with Gavin. The last message came a week later. I made a mistake. I didn't respond to that one either. She wasn't wrong. She had made a mistake. But not just by choosing Gavin over me. Her mistake had been assuming that I would always be there, that I would always be the safe, stable option she could fall back on if things didn't work out. That was never going to happen. In the days that followed, I started to see things more clearly than I had in a long time. For years, I had built my life around stability, thinking that if I worked hard, if I stayed consistent, if I did everything right, I would always have a place, both in my career and in my relationship. But security was an illusion. It had been ripped away from me in an instant. And in the process, I had learned something important. I wasn't the person they had taken me for. I wasn't weak. I wasn't disposable. I wasn't someone who could be cast aside and forgotten. I spent the next few weeks wrapping up loose ends. I had no reason to stay in this city anymore, no reason to keep walking the same streets, seeing the same places that held memories of a life that wasn't real. So I made a decision. I packed up my apartment, sold what I didn't need, and bought a one-way ticket to somewhere new. The morning I left, I got one final text. "If you ever want to talk, I'll be here." I stared at it for a long moment before finally typing out my only response. "Goodbye, Maddie." Then I turned off my phone, tossed it into the passenger seat of my car, and drove away without looking back. The past was behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future.